Okay, so note 7.3, we're going to be solving a quadratic inequality. It's the same as solving a quadratic equation by graphing, finding the roots, except you have a less than, a greater than, a less than or equal, or greater than or equal to. Okay, so we're still going to graph it the same way. So we're going to go to y equals on the calculator, and we're going to type in our equation, or our inequality. So x squared minus x minus 6. We're going to graph it and find the roots. To find the roots, you're doing second calc, number 2. I'm going to find the left root first, so the left side would be above the x-axis and then below. And then press enter. It should say 0 once you find your root, so that's negative 2, 0. And then we're going to find the other one, so second calc 2. Left side, right side, and then press enter, so 3, 0. So go ahead and sketch it. Alright, so this is where it's different from yesterday. So if your inequality, if it says it's less than 0, you're going to be shading below the x-axis. Now, we're not going to be shading the entire graph. We're only shading that portion of our parabola. Okay? So, below, let's do a highlighter. I'm just shading. Okay, so below the x-axis would be this portion here. Okay, so that would be our solution. Okay, when we are writing our solution, we should have an inequality in our answer. Okay, so we know that if we're shading all of it and we're not picking our pencil up, remember we talked about with shading and or statements. If it's all together, it's an and statement. If it's separate, it's an or statement. So since I shaded all together for my solution, it's going to be an and statement. So I'm going to put x in the middle. My x values will be in between negative 2 and 3. Okay, so my x's, negative 2 is less than 3. How we know if it includes those 2 points, we look back at the original inequality. Notice it's not equal to on the original, so it won't be equal to on your answer. Okay, so what this tells me is I can plug in any x value in between negative 2 and 3 into my original inequality, and it should be a true statement. So make sure that you're shading. Once you have shaded it, you should be able to determine if your answer will be an and or an or statement. So make sure you shade, then find your solution. Okay, so notice on number 2, we have the same example, except the inequality sign is different. So our graph should not look any different than number 1. So our 2 roots would be negative 2 and 3. Okay, so this time, notice it says greater than 0, which means you will be shading above the x-axis. So here's our x-axis. We're shading above, which would be this portion of the parabola, but also this portion of the parabola. So notice we had to pick up our pencil in order to shade both parts. So our answer should be an or statement for our solution. So if you look at this point here, this x value is negative 2. If we're going to the left, that x value is getting smaller. So x should be less than negative 2, not equal to, because our original did not have an equal to, or if you look at this one here, x is 3 here and it's going to the right, which means it's getting greater. So x would be greater than positive 3. So shade first, and then that will help you determine your and or solution. Okay? You can check it by plugging in anything that's less than -2 but greater than 3, and it should be true in your original inequality. Okay, let's take a look at this third example. So first thing, we're going to plug it in to y equals. So we have -2x squared minus 5x plus 3. We're going to find the two roots. So second calc number 2. I'm going to find the left one first. So the left side of that root is below there. Right side is above. Now notice on the calculator here, x is -3, but y is -1e to the -12th. That means 0. Anytime you have e to a negative power, that means 0. Okay, so our x-intercept would be -3. And then we need to repeat those steps and find the other one. So second calc 2. So left side, right side. Remember those arrows should face each other. Press enter. And then the other one would be 0.5. So a half. And then we're just going to sketch. Okay, so look back at your inequality. Notice it says greater than or equal to 0, which means we will be shading above the x-axis. Now notice on this one, if we shade above the x-axis, that is going to be all of this. So just because it says greater than doesn't necessarily mean that we're always going to have an or statement or always going to have an and statement. It depends on what your parabola looks like. So make sure that you're shading to determine what your solution will be. So since we shaded all together, our solution should be an and statement. So notice we're going from -3 on the x to positive 0.5. So and statement, x in the middle. We're going from -3 to 0.5 or a half. -3 is less than a half. How you know if it's including those two x values is if you look back at the original. Notice that it said equal to, so it should say equal to on your solution. Okay, looking at 4, notice on this one that we don't have everything on one side of our inequality. So your first step would be to add 1. So we have 3x squared minus 6x plus 1 is less than or equal to 0. Now I can use the calculator. So 3x squared minus 6x plus 1. We're going to find the roots. So second calc 2, the left side, right side, and then enter. So that would be let's run on 2 decimal places, so 0.18. And then we will repeat that. Second calc 2, go find the other one, left side, right side, enter. And that would be 1.82. Okay, so now we're going to shade. Notice that it says less than or equal to 0, which means we will shade below the x-axis. So here's our x-axis. We're shading below it, which means it will be all of this. So remember, I just told you, just because it says greater or less than doesn't mean that determines your and or. You have to shade it and then look. Because notice we'll have an and here, and we have a less than. The previous problem we had an and, but it was an or, okay, because you have to look at your, remember we would have to change the inequality sign if we had a negative. Okay, so we're going to have an and. Our x values are going to be in between 0.18 and 1.82. So 0.18 is less than 1.82. And then notice back the original, it was equal to, so it should be equal to on our answer. Okay, last one. We have x squared minus 6x plus 9. We're going to find the roots, second calc 2. Okay, so 2.9999 would be 3, 0. Let's see if there's... Okay, so notice that that is your, you go to your table here. Notice that that is also your vertex. That's the only place that it crosses here. So if you look back at your graph, so you're going to graph it. Notice it says greater than or equal to, so you'll shade above the x-axis. So when we shade here, notice it's the entire parabola, okay? Which means you could plug in any x value and it would always be true here. So I want you to write for your solution every single point, so that would be all real numbers. And I want you to actually write all real numbers here, okay? Because we're not asking for your domain or range here, we're just wanting the solution, which means any number you could plug in for x and it should be true, okay? Alright, so if it had actually said less than or equal to 0, you would have been shading below. So really the only solution would have been 3. Okay, that's the only way that it would have worked. Okay, because that was your only point that you had.